I've asked myself 1,000 times, maybe 10,000, if I should even be telling this story. Not because I'm afraid you won't believe me, I wouldn't have believed me a year ago, but because some things, once they're let out, can't ever be put back in the box. Some experiences change the very texture of your reality, and sharing them feels like pulling a thread that could unravel everything for someone else, too. But the silence is its own kind of haunting. So here it is. The story of the night I drove the ghost road and gave a ride to someone who couldn't possibly have been there. This is a new channel for incredible stories shared every single day. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. My name is Alex. I'm 31, or I was when this happened. By trade, I was well, I guess you could call me a professional skeptic. I ran a moderately successful podcast and a growing YouTube channel called Mythbreakers. The premise was simple. I'd take a famous urban legend, a ghost story, a local cryptid, and I would travel there, immerse myself in the lore, and then systematically, rationally, and respectfully debunk it. I wasn't a cynic out to ruin people's fun. I was a folklorist at heart, fascinated by why many smudge tell these stories. I believed they were metaphors, cultural anxieties given form. The Mothman was a manifestation of Cold War paranoia and industrial collapse. Bigfoot was our yearning for a world untouched by man. Ghosts were echoes of grief, a way for us to process loss. I had an explanation for everything, a neat little psychological box to put it in. My listeners and viewers loved it. They called me the friendly debunker. I had a beat-up but reliable 4x4, kitted out with professional audio and video equipment, and a passion for the open road. I thought I had the world all figured out. The legend of the vanishing hitchhiker was what I called the big one. It was the Mount Everest of my profession. It's one of the oldest and most widespread ghost stories in modern America, with variations in almost every state. You know the tale. A lonely driver picks up a figure on the side of a desolate road. They have a brief, often cryptic conversation, and then the driver looks over to find the passenger seat empty. Sometimes the hitchhiker leaves behind an item, like a sweater or a book, which later turns out to belong to someone who died on that same road years ago. For my Season 3 finale of Mythbreakers, I wanted to tackle the most infamous stretch of road associated with this legend, U.S. Route 491, stretching through New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. Before 2003, it had a different name, a name that still clung to it like exhaust fumes, Route 666, the Devil's Highway. Locals and travelers had reported everything on that road. Shadowy figures darting in front of cars, packs of demonic-looking dogs with glowing eyes, they called them the Hounds of Hell, and, most persistently, the vanishing hitchhiker. There wasn't just one. Some stories told of a young girl in a white dress, others of a silent old man in a trench coat, and some even of a state trooper whose patrol car had vanished from the road decades ago. To me, this was perfect. The variety of stories pointed not to a genuine paranormal phenomenon, but to a powerful, myth-making landscape. The road itself was the ghost. It was desolate, long, and hypnotic. It cut through the vast, empty expanse of the Navajo Nation, a place of profound history and spirituality. It was prone to sudden, violent weather. People got lost, they crashed, they disappeared. The stories, I reasoned, were a way of personifying the road's inherent danger. My plan was to drive the entire length of it, from Gallup, New Mexico to Monticello, Utah, stopping in small towns, interviewing locals, and recording my journey. I'd film at night, of course, for the atmosphere. I'd show my audience how the mind can play tricks on you in the dark, how headlights can warp shadows into figures, how loneliness can make you imagine a companion. The episode would be called The Psychology of the Ghost Road. I was proud of that title. It sounded so definitive. I spent the first 2 days of my trip gathering what paranormal investigators call preliminary evidence, but what I called local color. In a dusty diner just outside of Shiprock, a waitress with a kind, weary face told me her grandfather's story. He was a trucker in the 70s. He'd picked up a young Navajo woman standing by the road in the middle of a thunderstorm. She was soaked to the bone, shivering, and didn't say a word. He draped his own jacket over her shoulders and turned the heat up full blast. He asked where she was headed, and she just pointed vaguely up the road. He drove for about 10 miles, trying to make small talk, but she never replied. When he glanced over at a sharp bend, she was gone. The passenger door was still locked, His jacket was folded neatly on the seat, completely dry. He never drove that road at night again. Later, I spoke to a retired mechanic who told me about a couple he'd helped in the early 90s. Their car had broken down. They were terrified. They swore they had picked up an old man who had warned them about a washed-out bridge ahead. He'd been so insistent, so real, that they'd stopped the car, and just as they did, he vanished from their back seat. They got out and walked ahead, and sure enough, the bridge over a small arroyo had been completely swept away. If they hadn't stopped, they would have plunged into it. The mechanic said he'd heard that same story, or versions of it, half a dozen times. These were great stories, compelling, emotional, perfect for my podcast. I recorded them all, nodding sympathetically, while my inner skeptic was busy cataloging the tropes: the silent passenger, the impossible disappearance, the helpful warning, the leftover object. It was classic folklore, passed down and polished over generations. I felt like I was on the right track. I was confident, maybe even a little arrogant. I was Alex, the Mythbreaker. I was here to understand the story, not to become part of it. On the third night, I decided it was time for my own drive. The sky was a bruised purple, the sun having bled out over the western horizon, leaving behind a profound and intimidating darkness. There are no streetlights on most of Route 491. There's just your headlights, the white lines on the asphalt, and an ocean of blackness on all sides. The stars out there are incredible, a cold, indifferent fire that makes you feel cosmically small. I had my cameras running, one on my face, one on the road ahead, and one on the passenger seat. I was giving a running commentary, talking about the hypnotic effect of the road, the psychology of pareidolia, the tendency to see faces in random patterns.
You see,
I said to my camera, my voice echoing slightly in the cab of the truck.
Your brain is hardwired to recognize human forms. So when you're tired, you're stressed, and you're staring into the shifting play of light and shadow from your own headlights, a yucca plant can look like a person. A weathered rock formation can look like a crouching figure. It's not a ghost. It's your own survival instinct working overtime.
I drove for hours. The road was unnervingly empty. I passed maybe 3 cars in 2 hours. The only sound was the hum of my engine and the low drone of a country station I'd found that was mostly static. I felt a strange sense of disappointment. I'd secretly hoped for something. A weird light, a strange sound, anything to make the story more interesting. But there was nothing. Just the road. Just the dark. I was starting to think about wrapping it up, maybe finding a motel in the next town. I was tired, and my rational explanations were starting to sound hollow even to me, out there in the all-consuming silence. And that's when I saw her. She wasn't a shimmering apparition or a spectral figure. She was just a person, a woman standing on the gravel shoulder, her thumb half-heartedly stuck out. My headlights caught her, and I slowed down instinctively before my brain even caught up. My first thought wasn't ghost, it was, what on earth is someone doing out here? We were at least 50 miles from the last town and probably 30 from the next. There were no houses, no broken-down cars, nothing. She was just there, a solitary figure in the vast emptiness. She was wearing a simple, light-colored dress that looked thin for the chilly desert night. Her hair was dark and she looked young, maybe in her early 20s. As I pulled up beside her, my Mythbreaker brain finally kicked in. This is it. This is how the stories start. Someone vulnerable. Someone in need. I told myself this was probably a local who'd had a fight with her boyfriend and was walking home. Or maybe her car had broken down and she'd walked for miles before I found her. There were a dozen rational explanations. I rolled down the passenger window. The cold night air rushed in. "Hey, you okay? You need a ride?" I asked. She looked at me and her eyes were lost. That's the only word for it. Deep, dark, and filled with a sadness so profound it felt ancient. She didn't seem scared of me, a stranger in a big truck stopping in the middle of nowhere. She just seemed tired.
"I'm just trying to get home,"
she said. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but clear.
It's just up the road, a ways.
"Well, get in," I said, leaning over to push the passenger door open. "It's too cold to be out here." She nodded, a small, grateful gesture, and climbed into the truck. As she slid into the seat, a profound chill radiated from her, far colder than the night air. The constant static from the radio suddenly ceased, replaced by a dead, unnerving silence. The cab of the truck, which had smelled of old coffee and road dust, now carried a faint, clean scent, like fresh rain on dry earth. She moved with a strange grace, almost weightlessly. She buckled the seatbelt. I remember hearing the distinct click, and then sat staring straight ahead, her hands clasped in her lap. The camera on the passenger seat was recording her perfectly. Nong's gold. Asterisk, I thought. Nong's, this is absolute gold. I'll give her a ride to her house, interview her, find out her story. It will be the perfect human centerpiece to my episode about how these legends are born from real desperation. I pulled back onto the highway. My name's Alex, I said, trying to sound friendly and non-threatening. She didn't look at me. She just kept her eyes on the road ahead, on the twin beams of my headlights cutting through the night.
Thank you,
she whispered. We drove in silence for a few minutes. It was an awkward, heavy silence, the kind that makes you want to fill it with meaningless chatter. So, do you live around here? I tried again. She nodded slowly.
I did, a long time ago.
Strange turn of phrase, asterisk, I thought. I decided to try a different tack. It's a pretty intense road, this one. They say it's haunted. I gave a little chuckle, trying to lighten the mood. She finally turned her head and looked at me. Her expression was completely serious.
It's not haunted,
she said, her voice flat.
It's just hungry. It remembers.
A shiver went down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. The way she said it, it wasn't like she was telling a ghost story. It was like she was stating a fact, like saying the sky is blue. My journalistic instincts were now warring with a primal sense of unease. The rational part of me was trying to analyze her as a fascinating case study. The older, lizard part of my brain was screaming at me that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. I tried to keep my voice steady. Remembers what? She looked back at the road.
The people it takes. The promises that were broken here.
She paused, and for a moment I thought she wouldn't say more. Then she added, so quietly, I almost missed it.
It remembers the rain.
I had no idea what that meant. I was about to ask her to explain when my GPS, which I'd set for Monticello, beeped and announced a route update. It was a momentary distraction. I glanced down at the screen for no more than 2 seconds, just long enough to see the little car icon crawling along the dark line of the highway. When I looked back up, the passenger seat was empty. My mind didn't accept it at first. It just refused to process the information. She must have ducked down, I thought. Maybe she dropped something. Hey? I said, my voice cracking. Silence. I glanced over. The seat was vacant. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked more closely. The seatbelt was still buckled, stretched across an empty space where a person had been sitting just seconds before. The door was still locked. I hadn't heard a sound. No click of the door handle, no whoosh of air, nothing. She was just gone. I yelled, a short, sharp cry of pure shock, and slammed on the brakes. The truck screeched to a halt in the middle of the empty highway, tires protesting against the asphalt. My headlights lit up nothing but more road. I fumbled with my seatbelt, my hands shaking violently, and threw my own door open. I ran around the front of the truck, my breath catching in my throat, and wrenched the passenger door open. It was locked, so I had to stumble back to the driver's side, my mind reeling, and hit the unlock button. I pulled the door open again. The cab light came on, illuminating the empty seat, the clicked-in seatbelt. I looked in the back. Nothing. I got out and scanned the road, up and down, empty. The desert was vast and silent, watching me with a million glittering, stellar eyes. She couldn't have jumped out. The truck was moving at 60 miles an hour. And I would have heard it, I would have felt it. My Mythbreaker brain was short-circuiting. It was desperately trying to find a rational explanation, a trick, a hallucination. Was I that tired? Did I fall asleep for a second and dream the whole thing? But it felt so real. The chill in the air when she got in, the sound of her voice, the click of the seatbelt, the click of the seatbelt. What would you have done in my place? Keep driving? Call the police and sound like a lunatic? Or would you have just sat there on the side of the road, questioning your own sanity? Let me know in the comments. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the engine still idling, my own ragged breathing, the only sound in the universe. I was terrified. It was a kind of fear I had never experienced before. It wasn't the fear of a physical threat. It was the fear of reality itself dissolving. Everything I had built my identity on, logic, reason, evidence, had crumbled into dust in the space of 2 seconds. Slowly, shakily, I got back in the truck. I looked at my cameras. The one on my face would show a man slowly coming unglued. The one on the road would show nothing. I turned to the camera pointed at the passenger seat, my heart pounding. I rewound the footage on the small display screen. I saw myself talking. I saw myself pull over. I saw myself lean over and open the door. I saw the door open, then close. I saw the seatbelt move as if an invisible hand was pulling it, and I heard the click on the audio. And then nothing. The seat was empty for the entire duration of the drive. There was no woman. There was no one there. The camera had recorded an empty seat, but my microphones had picked up her voice. Faint, ethereal, but there.
I'm just trying to get home.
It remembers the rain.
My blood ran cold. I felt like I was going to be sick. Was I going crazy? Did I have a psychotic break on a lonely highway? My skeptical brain fought back, scrambling for an anchor. Could it be radio interference? A digital artifact? A glitch in the recording that mimicked a human voice? I ran a full diagnostic on the equipment right there in that motel room. 3 times. Everything was in perfect working order. The microphone was shielded. The audio file was clean. There was no rational, technical explanation. Which possibility was more terrifying? That I had lost my mind, or that my equipment had captured the impossible? I drove the rest of the way to Monticello in a state of pure, adrenaline-fueled shock. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't talk to my cameras. I just drove, my eyes glued to the road, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my mind a maelstrom of fear and confusion. I checked into the first motel I found, a grim little place with a flickering neon sign. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the edge of the bed, replaying the audio, watching the footage of the empty seat over and over again, the quiet, ghostly voice sending fresh waves of horror through me with every listen. The next morning I abandoned the Mythbreakers episode. The whole project felt like a sick joke, a monument to my own hubris. I was no longer a skeptic, I was a witness. But a witness to what? I packed up my gear, my hands still trembling slightly, and instead of heading home, I drove back the way I came, back towards Shiprock. I needed answers. Not for a podcast, but for myself. I needed to know I wasn't losing my mind. I went to the town's small public library, a place that smelled of old paper and quiet dignity. I started with the archives, pulling up old newspapers from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, looking for accident reports on Route 666. There were dozens. It was a brutal, unforgiving road. I found stories of single-car rollovers, head-on collisions, people who drove off into arroyos during flash floods. It was a catalog of sorrow. But nothing specific jumped out at me. Dejected, I was about to leave when the librarian, an elderly Navajo woman named Eloise, noticed the pile of newspapers on my table. She had kind, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through me.
Researching the old highway?
She asked, her voice gentle. I just nodded, not trusting my own voice.
It has many stories,
she said, stacking the papers neatly. Many sad stories. Are you looking for a particular one? I hesitated. How could I possibly explain? I'm interested in the vanishing hitchhiker legends, I managed to say. She gave me a long, searching look.
Ah, the woman in white.
Sometimes, I said. I heard a story about a woman who was caught in a storm. Eloise's expression softened with a deep, familiar sadness.
That would be Lydia,
she said.
Lydia Begay. It was 1968. A long time ago now. She was a young woman from our community. She was supposed to be married. Her fiancé was coming to meet her from Colorado. A storm blew in, one of the worst we'd ever seen. The roads flooded. He was delayed. She got worried and decided to walk down the highway to meet him. A truck driver hit her. He said he never saw her in the blinding rain.
My heart stopped. The rain, I whispered. It remembers the rain. Eloise nodded slowly.
They say her spirit still walks that road when a storm is coming, trying to get home, trying to warn people. The elders say the road took her, and so she became a part of the road. Or maybe...
she added, her voice dropping.
She's just looking for a ride from someone kind enough to stop.
I felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. This was it. This was her story. It wasn't just folklore. It was real. It was tied to a real person, a real tragedy. But then came the part that would shatter the last remnants of my old self. There was something else, I said, my voice barely audible. In my car, after she was gone, I found this. I reached into my pocket. In my panic the night before, after I'd run around the truck like a madman, I'd noticed something on the passenger floor mat. Something small and metallic that hadn't been there before. I picked it up and shoved it in my pocket without thinking. Now, my fingers trembling, I placed it on the library counter. It was a small, tarnished silver locket, shaped like a heart. It was old and worn, the kind of thing someone would treasure for a lifetime. Eloise gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. She gently picked up the locket, her fingers tracing its outline.
We never found it,
she whispered.
The family searched for it for years. It was her mother's. The newspaper article mentioned it was missing.
She looked from the locket to my face, and in her eyes, I saw not suspicion, but a kind of awed understanding.
She left it for you. It means she found her way. It means she can finally rest.
She said that Lydia's spirit was known to be restless, forever trapped on that road, and that by accepting her ride and showing her kindness without fear, I had somehow completed her journey. She hadn't vanished in terror. She had moved on, and the locket was her thank you. If these kinds of stories that blur the line between myth and reality fascinate you, make sure you're subscribed, because what I'm learning is that the world is far stranger than we think. I left the locket with Eloise, who promised to return it to what was left of Lydia's family. I drove away from that library a different man. The Mythbreaker was gone, replaced by someone who had looked into the abyss and found it wasn't empty. It was filled with echoes, with memories, with grief, that was so powerful it could literally get into your car. My world, once so neat and tidy, was now filled with terrifying, beautiful, and inexplicable possibilities. I never produced the Season 3 finale. My channel went dark for 6 months. I couldn't bring myself to edit the footage, to listen to that voice, to try and explain it away. How could I? There is no rational explanation for a ghost in your car, for a voice on your audio that your camera can't see, for a locket that appears out of thin air. A tangible piece of the past delivered to the present. This story is my return. It's my confession. I'm not a debunker anymore. I don't know what I am. A seeker, maybe. A witness, definitely. The world isn't a collection of facts to be cataloged. It's a story, and it's far older and stranger than any of us can imagine. I still drive the open roads, but now I do it with a different kind of respect, a different kind of fear. And every time I see a lonely stretch of highway at night, I think of Lydia Begay. And sometimes, when I'm driving alone, I feel the temperature drop on the passenger side. A sudden, inexplicable chill. Maybe it's just my imagination. Or maybe not all stories want to be told. Share your thoughts or theories in the comments. I read all of them.